Welcome back to Behavior Shift. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that's decisions. But not just how to make better ones. Today we're going to show you how to categorize those decisions so that you can use the right tools at the right time for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because not every decision should be approached in the same way. If you try to analyze every small choice, you'll get what we call analysis paralysis, right? But if you wing it with the big stuff, you might end up regretting that. So, we're going to talk about a decision quadrant, and we're going to show you how a decision quadrant can help us know which decision uh, is which.
Yeah, and this is a great tool. Kurt, can you kind of take a moment to walk us through how the quadrant works?
Yeah, so it's simple. We look at decisions through two lenses or two kind of axes, right? There's impact. How big are the consequences of making this decision? Are they going to be huge? Are they going to be small? Whatever it is. How big is the impact? And then we also look at it difficulty. How much time, effort, or complexity in thinking about this is involved typically in making that decision, and we cross these two, and if that creates a 2 by 2 grid, right? And we end up with 4 types of decisions, which we've labeled tricky, critical, routine, and satisficing.
All right, let's start with tricky decisions. What is a tricky decision?
All right, so these are, these high impact, but, you need to make them fast. They're quick, right? So it's gonna be that upper left-hand part of this quadrant as we're looking at it. So the stakes are big, but you don't have a lot of time and you might be under heavy pressure to act. Let's think about this. I'll give you a couple examples, right? Your boss asks you to pick between 2 marketing campaigns by the end of the day, and you haven't had a chance to really review them or look at them. Now you gotta pick. Or you're debating whether to adopt a pet when the shelter calls and says, "We need a decision now. We need that decision. We got another family waiting for it." Or you have a limited time offer on this great timeshare vacation with a deal that won't be around if you wait. You need to sign this thing now, now, now. Those are your tricky decisions.
Hopefully too many people aren't getting tricked by that one anymore, but who knows? So these feel like a lot of high pressure sales type situations. They're serious choices, but they're on a really tight time frame.
Yeah, often they are that, right? The timeshare one, if anyone has ever been in that situation, is the perfect example. And as you said, they people use this as a trick to get you to jump in a decision before you've actually had a chance to really think it all through. It's all about that decision under time pressure, and you got to make it now on this big thing that we're focused in on.
So again, yeah, these are serious choices. They have a pretty big impact, but you don't have a lot of time to actually process and make that decision.
Yeah, and so Ben, the danger here is that we tend to rely on our system one thinking when we're under time pressure, right? Our fast, intuitive, emotional brain, which means that those decisions are going to be more influenced by the stress, pressure, or the emotional state that we're in rather than by the rational analysis, which they might need. And that's always tricky.
So tricky decisions sound tricky to make, right? So how do we handle making these tricky decisions?
Well, the first thing is we wanna slow our system 1 brain down, right? At least a little bit. So, again, we can use a quick framework like, "What's the worst case scenario? What would future me thank me for?" Or we can use simple heuristics, like, a when-then statement, if we know that we might be put in these situations when the salesperson is requiring me to sign now for this vacation rental place, or I will say no, or I will take a walk or whatever it would be. Or you can do other heuristics like, the 2 breaths, 7 breaths that we've talked about in other episodes.
Love it. And for anyone that hasn't heard it, System One, we just did an episode on episode 17, the one before this. Go back and listen to it. It'll break down the System One versus System Two decisions for you a little bit more to give some context around that.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Um, now that we've talked through tricky decisions. Let's move on to the next part of the quadrant, which is critical decisions.
Yeah, so critical decisions, high impact, but we have more time, right? They're often challenging. They're the big ones, choosing your career path, deciding whether to buy a house, weighing a medical treatment. Here, you most likely have the time and space to think things through, which means that you're more likely to engage system two thinking, that
Mhm.
slower, more deliberate, logical part of your brain.
So big impact decisions, much more time to actually make them. That means that in these situations, we can actually bring out the heavy decision making tools. We have the time to do so.
Exactly. So tools like decision matrices, right? Scenario planning, pro and con lists. You can even do pre-mortems, which we've talked about before, right? Imagining what could go wrong before you're actually making that decision, right? And the key here, and this is the thing with critical, is use these tools to avoid what we call motivated reasoning. And that's the tendency to only look for information that supports the option we kind of already emotionally want. So we use these structured tools to force us to consider alternates and to weigh trade offs in a more rational, fair way.
So with critical decisions, now it's about slowing down. It's about using effective tools, the right tools, making sure they're the right tools. And it's about fighting your inherent biases
Right.
to do so.
Yeah. So don't outsource these decisions to gut instinct. They deserve really thoughtful analysis.
Okay. Well, moving along again in the quadrant, our next one is routine decisions. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so routine decisions are the ones that we face actually most in our lives, right? They are the low impact, fast and easy, quickly made, right? So, what shirt am I going to wear today? Which coffee mug to grab? What am I going to have for lunch today? By themselves, they don't really matter much. The shirt, if I pick this blue shirt that I'm wearing versus a white shirt, you know what? My life really probably won't be marginally impacted, right? However, we need to make sure, as we've talked about in other episodes a lot, is that they can compound. And if we, again, have them and those lead to habits, and those habits then actually shape our lives. So here, rules and defaults help. Like I always take the stairs instead of hopping on the elevator, right? Or I always prep lunch for Monday on Sundays or for the week on Sundays. So you can create positive automatic routine, and those decisions free up your energy to be thinking about those tricky or critical ones.
Awesome. So routine decisions kind of happen all the time, but and we may overlook them, but if we let them build up over time, it gets back into that compounding effect that we've talked about in previous episodes too.
Exactly, exactly.
With that, let's move to the final corner of the decision quadrant, and let's talk about satisficing decisions.
Yeah, so this one I think is gonna be interesting for people 'cause, satisficing first is just not a term. It's a term from economics basically saying, "All right, we're not optimizing something, we're just making sure that it meets a minimum standard." And so satisficing decisions are basically those. They're low impact, but often we make them out to be bigger, and so we spend a lot of time on them, and we feel like they take a lot of energy, but actually they don't really matter that much. So, you know, like you could spend 30 minutes researching toothpaste brands or agonizing over which pen to buy, Ben.
I feel personally attacked. I like my Micron pens, and you know what? I don't like the other ones. So,
We all do, right? Right? And the trick is to recognize when you're in this quadrant and all right, sometimes it's okay to spend that time if it's really important to you, but oftentimes it's not, right? And so to recognize when you're in this quadrant and cut off that analysis part that you just keep going on. So you can, again, some ways to do that, right? So set rules. Cheapest toothpaste wins, or I'll pick the first decent option to move on. We don't want to waste decision making energy on these low stakes stuff.
This is really interesting, and it seems like a really powerful tool. What would you say the big picture value of this model is?
Yeah. So when you have a model like this, it helps because it matches the right strategy, the right decision strategy to making the right types of decision. So again, we talked about system one, system two last episode, right? So in a tricky decision, right, we want to slow system one down in order to avoid those emotional mistakes. But in critical decisions, we want to make sure we engage system two and we want to use tools to avoid that motivated reasoning. So, when we get to routine decisions, we want to set up automatic responses and build good habits as opposed to, just going off the cuff and not really thinking about long-term impact when they do become habits. And then for satisficing, we just want to make sure that we're not overthinking things, that we're not getting bogged down when, if I choose the chicken or the fish for dinner tonight, am I really going to make that big of a impact on my life? No, it's going to just be probably marginally different. And at the end, in a week, I won't even remember that I ate chicken or fish, right?
Unless the chicken's undercooked.
Unless the chicken's undercooked. Very good point.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think another important point to make here is that while this is a really powerful tool, the same decision could look completely different for different people as far as to how that categorizes out via the quadrant.
Yeah, you already mentioned, like, you like your pens, you like a very specific pen, alright? I'm not as particular about my pens. It makes sense for you to spend more time researching and looking and making sure that the pen that you have fits your style of who you are. For me, that doesn't. I'm not going to get the same benefit out of that. You could think about, I might be a person who I have 5, 10 different pets around, and so I know how to make that, and it's a more of a routine decision, whereas for somebody else, it is a very critical one, depending on their lifestyle, depending upon monetary pieces, and even for the same person, this is really important, Ben, even for the same person, quadrants can shift with context.
So the quadrant isn't just about labeling decision once and for all. It's not a line in the sand. It's about giving us a lens that we can use to allocate our time and energy wisely based on the decision that we're currently facing at the time in our lives that it is.
Yeah, that's it. Instead of treating all decisions the same, like this is how I make my decisions, you categorize them. And then when you categorize them, you can pick the right tool or the right decision making style, the right brain style in order to make sure that you're doing this right.
Awesome. Well, listeners, your challenge this week, I'll say in a minute, but before we do, check the link in the comments. We'll include a free download for a decision quadrant tool that you can utilize at home. We'll throw a QR code on the screen too that you can scan to access that same quadrant. Download that and try it out. Pick one decision you're facing, drop it into that quadrant, and then use the strategy that fits right for you.
Yeah, because better decisions don't just happen. They're built when we bring the right mindset to the right moment.
Love it. We'll see you next time on Behavior Shift.